Welcome to Quantumrun-on-One, a podcast where we interview leading experts, researchers, and thinkers to gain their insights into the emerging trends and innovations that will reshape our world over the next few decades. My name is David Tall, and I'm your host. In this episode, we're interviewing Yannick Roy, co-founder and executive director of Norfolk X, an international organization that promotes the development of neurotechnology. During our chat, Yannick is going to share his insights into some of the latest news and trends he's seeing in the field of neurotechnology and the potential impact it can have on our healthcare system and society at large. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Yannick Roy. Hey Yannick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on. Now, I believe we first connected not too long ago after our social media manager noticed that you followed us on Twitter. And then after she looked into your profile, she discovered that you are, that is, heavily involved in the field of neurotechnology. Now, that's a topic we've always been really excited about in Quantumrun. And it's a topic we've written about in a number of different future forecasts across a range of industries and fields. So, that's why, we always jump at the opportunity to talk with experts in this growing field. So maybe we can begin with you sharing with our listeners a little bit about your background in neurointerfaces and, what drew you to this field.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career by studying computer science. Then I did my undergrads in electrical engineering. Then I started a master in biomedical engineering, which I fast-tracked into a PhD in visual neuroscience, more specifically in cognitive neuroscience for cognitive training. So I'm deeply passionate with neurotechnology in general, meaning to combine technology and the brain, because I think that the potential is just so exciting. We definitely live an amazing time in history, and this potential is just amazing. So that's what brought me in the field of watching a lot of videos on YouTube about brain-computer interfaces, about new stuff coming from whether DARPA research, some movies kind of like try to foresee the future ahead of us. So all these different tips into the future is really what got me into neurotechnology. So my PhD is focusing more on the cognitive training aspect. So meaning that we want to train our brain to get better at different tasks, whether it's, for example, visual attention, memory, just focus in general and things like that. So what I do is I work on brain-computer interfaces in real time that can help you to get better at training your brain to get better at different tasks, simply put. So I'll have time to elaborate more on that. But definitely what got me into the field is just the amazing future, as we'll talk during this interview. We'll explore different aspects of brain-computer interfaces and neurotechnology in general. And I think that there is so much things to be done, but we're still very, very early in the field. So it's exciting.
Right. So maybe let's take a step back and from your perspective, maybe you can share with our listeners what is neurotechnology and, what is brain-computer interfaces or BCI? For someone who's completely new to the topic, how would you explain it to the layperson?
Yeah, so neurotechnology as it stands mean to combine the brain or the nervous system to all its extent with technology. So that definitely takes different forms and shapes of technology, whether it's, for example, I was mentioning cognitive training. So trying to train your cognitive capacities. So as I mentioned earlier, with technology. So for example, we've heard about some brain games, for example. That's one sort of to one end of the spectrum of neurotechnology, where it's really to train your brain. So it's related. It's technology related to your brain. So that's really one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, it's really more about the hard technology. So for example, we see when we think about technology, we usually think about, for example, computer chips, robotics, and things like that. So for example, implanting a chip in your brain for epilepsy or things like that, more on the medical side of things, that's also neurotechnology.
Right.
So anything related with your brain nervous system, and technology qualifies as neurotechnology. So it's really very wide spectrum. So now within that realm, there are obviously subcategories. Brain-computer interfaces is one of them. And brain-computer interfaces is really the interface between a computer or a machine. So the field is often referred to, instead of brain-computer interfaces, as brain-machine interface, because it's not necessarily just a computer per se, but it could be an exoskeleton, a machine in general. So this is really the realm of connecting your brain with a machine. What that means is that the machine is trying to read or interpret what's going on in your brain to do something. So one clear example, the field was really created for people that are locked in or paralyzed. So their brain is fully functional, right, is fully intact. So they are very smart people, but they are locked in. Their body just not responds to their brain. So that's really unfortunate because they are locked into their own head. So we're trying to read what's happening or to understand with machines by putting, for example, electrodes, so small sensors that will read electrical activity. So you've probably seen these images, whether it's hospital or in movies, where you have kind of a cap, kind of like a swimming cap with a bunch of wires plugged into it. These are called electrodes that records the EEG, electroencephalography signal. So that's recording your brain electrical activity. And from that pattern, that electrical activity, we're trying to infer what's going on. So, for example, if I ask you to think about moving your left arm or think about moving your right arm, this will produce different electrical activity in your brain. And for some specific things where we know kind of where to look into your brain, and then we will try to train an algorithm with machine learning to differentiate different mental states to give you some commands. So, for example, in that space, when you're trying to control a machine, for example, a wheelchair. Right. So let's give a clear example. You're locked in, and then we want to make you control a wheelchair with your brain. So basically, we'll put you the cap, as I mentioned earlier, the EEG system. You'll be on your wheelchair, and then we'll train you, and we'll say, for example, think about moving your left arm. Then do nothing. Then think about moving your left arm. Do nothing. And then we'll do that over and over again, high number of times of repetition. And then we'll train a machine learning algorithm to try to pick up when you're trying to move your left arm. Then we'll do the same thing, for example, with your right arm. And then this will give you, for example, do nothing, move left, and move right as commands to send to the wheelchair. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that we will do for now, it's more in the research and really kind of a university level. So there is not really systems out there at this point that you can just buy and just use yourself or anything like that. It's really just getting started. One of the reasons is because the accuracy of such system is really limited. So it takes a lot of training, a lot of hours of training. So obviously when you are locked in, even 100 hours of training is nothing because time has a very different meaning when you're locked in, obviously.
And when you say, locked in for our listeners, one good example is, the case of Stephen Hawking, where due to his disease, his brain is still fully functional and he's still absolutely brilliant, but his disease makes it impossible for his brain to actually move his body or, a great deal of his body. So I think that's probably what you meant there. And also, I think we can sum this up by saying that neuro interfaces and brain-machine interfaces, they're trying to make thought and code almost interchangeable. Is that right? Where the thoughts that we have in our brains can be translated into code that machines can read, interpret, and act upon. Does that make sense?
Totally. So. Yeah, totally. To some extent, so we are really early. But if we try to extrapolate what BCIs will be in the future, and when I say BCI or BMI, that's the short abbreviation for brain-computer interfaces. And if we try to extrapolate and foresee in the future what it's going to be like, obviously we can think about like the Matrix, right? So like it's all happening kind of like in your head, and when you're controlling things with your head, with your own thoughts. So it's that seamless integration with technology and the digital world with your brain. So obviously that's kind of I would say open to debate where and how far we'll be able to push it and merge and understand the brain, because right now we don't. One of the main limitations is that we don't really understand the brain very much.
So maybe we can jump a little further now, just to have a bit of fun. Where, I'm sure you've watched a bunch of sci-fi shows and movies over the past few years that have featured BMI or BCI tech in some way, and I'm sure that when you watch these types of movies, you must have been a lot more critical than the average film goer. So over the past few years, what movies or TV shows stuck out to you in how they featured neurotechnology, and how do you think these films presented this technology? Were they accurate, or were they not going far enough?
Yes, so definitely Hollywood is often there to you have kind of the science. You take kind of like a really 1% of the science, and then you make 99% of hopes and hypes and like big blockbusters out of it. It's still interesting sometimes to just turn, even if the science is not right, just to enjoy what it'd be like, for example, like the Matrix and things like that.
Right.
So a couple of movies that are really real interesting, and then we can maybe describe a bit more and what's real and what's not real with these movies. So Surrogates with Bruce Willis, for example, is a good example of such movie. Avatar, obviously, is the best example of such technology. We've seen Transcendence as well with Johnny Depp recently. A bit older, there was Strange Days, Demolition Man. So we've seen a couple of movies. One that I particularly liked, I don't remember, it was a couple of years ago. It's Gamer. I don't know if you've watched the movie where you can control. It's kind of like playing a first-person shooter, with a real.
Yeah, I think it was a smaller movie that it didn't really get a lot of attention from back in the day.
Yeah, no, it didn't make. It wasn't as big as Avatar or Surrogates or even Transcendence. It was a smaller movie that went a little under the radar, but for people really into futuristic tech and things like that, definitely watch that movie. Where it's so the idea behind the movie is playing a first-person shooter, but with a real someone as opposed to a game.
Okay.
So you're basically controlling someone else in the world, in an environment, so in a playground or battlefield, and then you're, as a gamer, in your basement or whatever, and instead of a remote control, as you would have in a first-person or your mouse and keyboard, what you have is basically EEG device or some sort of technology where you can control the brain of someone else. So you're basically taking over that person's body, free will, and controlling that person who's having a gun, and then you shoot other people.
Interesting.
So that's kind of like the link of being able to, with your brain and thought, be able to control something else, and as opposed to be a machine, it's another person.
And I guess like maybe a simpler version of that, more on the brain machine interface side, is movies like RoboCop, or in Star Trek, the villain of the Borg in general, where BMI is more where humans are integrated with machine bodies, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. So some of these movies, one that was kind of a big budget production, but didn't received as positive critics as it would have liked, is Pacific Rim.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's a really good example where the Earth is being invaded by aliens, by big monsters, and they create gigantic machines, robots, to fight them. And in order to control these robots, it's two people connecting their brain together to control this machine. So you have a neural system that will connect with your brain, and then you sync two people together, your brain, and then and then you'll start controlling the robots, the machines, with the two people in neural sync that they call it in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really good example of that kind of technology where you have two people. And then you try to read what's happening in the brain, and then you control, and then you suddenly your brain is not controlling on your body, but the machine's body. Avatar, well, Surrogate is another really good example where so you connect in, and this movie really taps into VR, which is also another emerging technology,
Mm-hmm.
virtual reality. Where in Surrogates, what you do is basically you sit on your chair, and then you wire yourself, and then you go in this virtual world, and you control it not with a joystick or with a mouse pad, but really with your brain. So you connect your brain, and then you suddenly control your avatar in that game, in that virtual environment, and you embody that new this new avatar in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really good. Also, obviously we're far from being there, but as a societal impact that combine brain technology with VR, it's interesting to see some of these movies coming to the big screen so that we can, think about the future and foresee and start raising questions about what's the impact of such technologies.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe let's, bring this back down to reality for a second. I mean, given how closely you monitor the field, can you talk to us about some of the more or less recent headlines or breakthroughs in the field of neurotechnology that, something that has got you really excited or intrigued about the field that's coming about lately?
Yes. So the first thing that everybody needs to know and understand about neurotechnology is that it's super exciting, but it's very early in the field. There is a lot of potential, but we are very early and limited at this point. So every time you read news, you need to be really to put your critic hats on, because don't take everything as it is out there in the media, especially if you don't read like scientific papers, but really just kind of like what you see on Facebook and what's going viral, because a lot of the buzzwords, hypes, and hopes are being widely spread. And while it's based on real science, it's often exaggerated, and people are thinking that it's happening right here, right now, and that people are controlling everything with their brain in their home. So, so I'm going to talk about the technology in a bit, in the science and where we're at, but really keep in mind that a lot of what you see in the media, it's based on real science, but it's exaggerated to a certain extent.
Okay.
So a lot of the title that you read, mind control this, mind control that, we need to take that with a grain of salt.
Okay.
So one of the good example with the World Cup, I believe in 2014, it was in Brazil. We've seen a teenager that was paralyzed from the neck down, if I remember, or perhaps just the legs. He was in an exoskeleton, and that was a project spearheaded by Miguel Nicolelis, which is one of the godfathers of the brain-computer interfaces field. He's really well known for his work with monkeys and rats, connecting brains with technology. And with that FIFA, the soccer or football, depending on where you're coming from. So during the World Cup in Brazil in 2014, there was a teenager that kicked the ball. So kind of like for the opening, controlling an exoskeleton with his brain. Right. So if you go on YouTube and you just try to search for FIFA World Cup BCI exoskeleton, you'll find that video really easily. It was very viral and famous. And that was a good example of the potential of the technology. But when we look at it more closely, the only thing that that person was able to really control was a really small kick, basically. So yes, it was featured and marketed as like an exoskeleton being controlled by brain-computer interfaces, but really it was a EEG reading that the person is trying to kick the ball. So it's really limited when you look at it, but it's exciting to think about what are the next small step and the evolution of such a thing. So now it's the exoskeleton. We control roughly a small kick and then another one and then more and more, and that's the potential. So this is a good example of where people need to take things with, because then it went viral, and it was, you can control the full exoskeleton, and the kid can walk as if it's nothing with the exoskeleton. So
fair enough.
So that was a good example and a good PR or marketing stunt, I would say, to bring more visibility to the field of BCI. Another good example, and I'm kind of like giving some less scientific research, but more kind of like marketing, people that might have seen coming in the news. Sure. Another one that occurred at the end of 2016 was the Cybathlon, which was marketed, I would say, as the Bionic Olympics. They had, I think the name Olympics because I think that they had some trouble with the real Olympics. But the idea with that was to organize a bionic competition. So there was multiple categories like exoskeleton, prosthetics, BCIs, things like that. And the BCI category or discipline was people that are paralyzed, and they need to, it's a race. It's a brain-computer interface race where you can see that kind of as if you're playing in an arcade, a car simulator in a race. So you're racing with your friend next to you, and you're driving the car and you're racing. But in this case, it's people that are paralyzed and that they are controlling the race with their brain. Huh. So a lot of research team from around the world, they had maybe, I don't know, like 2 years or 1 year to work on developing the system. So the pilot itself needed to be paralyzed. So that was a condition. It couldn't be like a healthy subject and a healthy pilot. And the research team or any team that wanted to participate, but really everybody was in the research lab. So there was not really any team outside of academia that was really there. And then there was, I don't know, over 10 teams participating and with pilots, and it was really a race, but brain control. So obviously here, again, it's really limited, the degrees of freedom. So how many commands or how many actions or different mental states can we really differentiate? So that's really the main challenge in BCI right now. It's how many states can you actually use as commands?
So maybe we can touch on that a little bit, where given all these advances and headlines, what do you think is the next step in the field of neurotech or BMI? What new innovations in science or technology are needed to really advance the field?
So definitely a lot of the progress will be done with non-invasive technology, but the real next big leap will be coming out from invasive technology. So what I mean by non-invasive versus invasive is the non-invasive one is from outside your head. So we put a cap with electronics, with electrodes and things like that. Outside, there is no surgery, and it's not invasive for your body. As in the other end, the invasive one is that will put something in your body. So most of the time with brain tech, we'll open your skull and then we'll put chip, electrodes, things like that, some technology on or in your brain to try to get a better signal. Because one of the main challenge with reading the brain activity is really the signal to noise ratio. So it's really like tiny activity. Your brain is super complex, and we're trying for really far from the brain when we look at it. When we're recording from your head, in your hair, for example, when we think about it, it's really far from the signal, given the ratio, like strength of the signal, distance. I don't want to be too go into the details into engineering about it, but trying to read the brain from outside your head is really challenging. It's really hard to be able to have a good signal. So we're trying to go right at the source and be in the brain or on the brain to try to record right from it what's happening. So the big dream would obviously, if we try to think about nanobots, for example, like nanotechnology, really, really, really small, tiny technology that we could have all over your brain to read everything in your brain, that would be like the holy grail. So that's where some research is trying to go. Recently, we've seen a lot of Elon Musk talking about things like neural lace.
Right.
So Elon Musk recently, not only is he taking a stand on AI, but also now instead of AI, humans to stay relevant in an AI and robotic world, we need to merge with machines. So basically brain-computer interfaces. So we need to be able to communicate with our brain directly to the machine. So
given all this dependence on basically interfacing with the brain, how closely does your field partner with actual brain scientists? Scientists who are actively trying to understand how the brain functions and topic of that nature.
Yeah, so more and more, obviously, because brain-computer interfaces is a multidisciplinary field. So you need engineering, you need electrical engineering, you need computer scientists, you need machine learning experts, you need neuroscientists, you need people that are more in the psychology, cognitive aspect things. So now it's really multidisciplinary, and now we're seeing new kind of labs and research being done with all these areas being merged and combined together, because you cannot be a BCI expert and control kind of like the full pipeline from the electrical engineering to the really neuroscience. Normally it's a team of multiple experts together that will work on a common goal. So that's really one of the challenges, that there are so many challenges in the pipeline that you need a full team now to work on it. But definitely, it's not I would say, a technology field as it is a neuroscience field. It's the combination of all of them together. So everybody's working hand in hand. More now, I would say, like 10 years before, it was still very siloed, and this is why the progress wasn't really fast. Now we have a lot of new multidisciplinary team in the field.
So once neuroscience does mature, basically, what are the breakthroughs that will enable that? Is it just the ability to read any brain perfectly? Is it the ability to read thoughts in real time? What are the specific abilities that scientists or technologists need to achieve in order to make the sci-fi representations of BCI a reality?
That's actually a very good question, because there is multiple scenario that can unfold that will lead to very good results, depending on what is the goal, what are we trying to achieve. So let me give you some example. If we're trying to control a wheelchair for locked in and paralyzed people, that's one thing. If we're trying to go very far and talk about mind uploading, trying to really put your brain and back up your brain on a computer.
Like whole brain emulation.
Brain emulation, exactly. So all that space where the idea is really that the brain can be, there is nothing more than the difference. It's an engineering system that we can model with, for example, electronics and technology, and that we can reproduce and copy your brain, for example, on the cloud with technology. So we can talk a bit more about that, because that's really exciting. That's really obviously a lot of controversy around that. And the other one is trying to understand the brain, for example, diseases, to cure diseases, understand consciousness, free will, things like that. So it really depends what the goal is, and different scenario will apply for different things. For example, if we're trying to understand free will and consciousness, then we really need to understand the brain at a very small and very detailed level. If we're trying, on the other hand, to control a machine with our brain, maybe that can be a black box, and maybe AI can just learn. For example, if we take deep learning, right now in the field, it's getting better and better at image recognition. And neural nets and deep neural nets are basically kind of a sort of a black box to some point, where the machine itself just learns. You don't really know what it learns, but at the end of the day, you have an input and you have an output, and it works, or it makes sense at least. So that could be a very, and I think that there will be a lot of the breakthrough that will come from kind of black box machine learning, where we train someone, we say, do this, do that, and you learn. So it's kind of a relationship with you and the machine, where the machine is learning your brain, and you're learning the machine to get the right output, but nobody really knows what's happening. So the machine doesn't really understand your brain, and you don't really understand what the machine is understanding from your brain, but it just works. You're at the end of the day, you're moving your wheelchair when you think about this or that.
Right.
So that's kind of a black box approach. And I think that big data, as we get more and more people using this kind of device, I think that we'll be able to have some models that can differentiate some mental states and things like that with a black box kind of approach.
So I guess once all these advances are made and neurotechnology matures, like you said, what are the potential applications that people might see in their day-to-day lives? Is BCI only for people with serious physical injuries, or how might the average person use it in their real life?
Yep. So obviously, most of the field and the research is for fixing the brain, not necessarily enhancing the brain or your life. So obviously, public funded research is focusing on non-healthy subjects. So it's really hard to get money just to enhance the brain unless it's coming from DARPA or military or private money. But most of the research is to help people that are unhealthy. So, for example, when we think about epilepsy, Parkinson, to addiction, sleep disorder, ADHD, and the spectrum is all the brain-related diseases, and is obviously really, it's a very big field. And most of the money and the research is being done to fix or bring back to normal, let's say, the brain.
Right.
Now, more recently, we're starting, because we know a bit more and technology is moving really fast. Now we're starting to explore a bit more on the enhancement side of things. So, for example, one really good example recently that went a bit viral is Brian Johnson in Silicon Valley with his company Kernel and his investment fund called OS Fund. So his mission with his fund is to, as OS, as kind of operating system, right. He wants to put some money and investment and bring more investment later on to put forward brain enhancement technology. So what I mean by enhancement, obviously that's also very wide. But for example, memory, cognitive capacity, reaction time, just fluid intelligence in general. So I think that we all want to stay sharper and sharper as we age. We want to get to keep at least our memory, or even more enhance our memory. So this is something that is. So he founded his company called Kernel. It was announced last year, and its mission is within, I think it's a roadmap of like 7 to 15 years, something like that, where he wants to implant chips in people's brain, in healthy people's brain, to enhance intelligence. So obviously we need to define a bit more what intelligence mean, but roughly you can think about just being faster at doing different tasks, and also memory. So having
would these chips provide these enhancements just purely by themselves, or would they need to work through a connection to the internet, for example?
That's a very good question, because as I said, since we are kind of early in the field, the table is open, so we can do whatever we want, and obviously any technology that will be connected to any network is open to being hacked as well. So I think that we'll see a lot of different things in that space. I think that connection with internet will be there, but such connection will, it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds, because obviously all the privacy, hacking, things like that are dangerous, but once you're connected, you have probably more possibilities. So for example, if you want to, if you're smarter, things like that, memory, and we can tap into memory, perhaps we can digitalize, and now I'm really stretching it really far. But yeah, there is no rule at this point in this as an answer for your question.
Okay.
I would like to have like a specific answer, but we'll see how it goes. But that chip, the goal is really so you get a small surgery, then we put a chip in your brain near your hippocampus probably for memory things. And then you get kind of this enhanced brain. So that's kind of the mission. And just the fact that we're there and that people, so he put $100 million on the table to put that forward. And just the fact that a lot of rich people will see this kind of opportunity, I think that we'll see a shift towards research and development of enhancement. So people that want to, as I said earlier, age sharper cognitively speaking.
Yeah. So I guess maybe touching on that and, thinking a little bit broader. From your perspective, how or where might neurotechnology impact our society at large? How might it change our culture once it becomes mainstream in, say 20 years from now?
So the first thing obviously will be to get rid of, or at least handle every brain-related diseases like Parkinson's. So it's already being worked. We have some really nice technology. For example, with brain stimulation, basically we implant a small chip, some piece of electronics in the brain, and when you start like shaking, we can stimulate your brain. So basically the technology will send an electrical stimulation to your brain to inhibit the shaking. So suddenly you stop shaking, trembling. So that's a kind of in all of different, so as I said earlier, same thing with epilepsy, sleep disorder, addiction. So we'll shift a little from pharma to tech. So that's going to be the first societal shift that we will see happening more and more in the coming years. Trying to drugs will obviously improve, get better, more specific, less side effects. So that's going to be obviously moving forward at the same time in parallel. But in terms of the technology, we'll see more and more of the technology being used in clinics and therapy, things like that for brain-related diseases. So that's going to be one of the big thing that we'll see more and more in the coming years. The other big impact in our lives, I think, will be more on the seamless aspect. So, for example, in education, so we'll get better tools for education, for learning. ADHD, for example, trying to focus and try to train the brain to focus. So whether that will take the shape of software, of training where you wear an EEG device or any other kind of headsets or things like that. For example, if you think about VR coming in classrooms. So in the VR headset, in the virtual reality headset like Oculus or any other devices, they will have some electrodes, some sensor embedded in the technology. It's going to be part of the device itself. So you won't have the impression that you're wearing 3 or 4 devices. You'll just put your VR headset and you have a bunch of sensor that will monitor your brain state, your reaction, your facial expression, things like that. And then the content itself that you will be the experience in the environment will be tailored to your mental, physical state. So that's going to be one of the first next step that we'll see. And then in 10 years or so, then we'll see more on the invasive side of things. So we'll probably see more surgery, more people with chips for various reasons. And brain stimulation is also very exciting. It's been very viral recently where people zap their brain because with a 9-volt battery, you can put 2-wire with a 9-volt battery, some capacitor, some resistor, and then you can just put these 2 wires on your head and send an electrical current through your brain to try to boost your cognitive capacities. So that's a very, again, a lot of controversy in that field.
Yeah, a lot of college students are doing that.
Exactly. So that field will also evolve. So just to give you a rough overview right now, the field is promising, but we don't really understand what's happening. So there is positive results. It seems to do something. It seems to quote unquote work, but we don't really know what we're doing. It's kind of like taking a big cannon to hit a small target. Yes, you're hitting the target, but you're also doing a bunch of other things that you don't really understand what's happening. So we will definitely get better and better at it for brain stimulation. So that's also very exciting that we'll see more and more in coming years.
All right. So basically, it sounds like neurotechnology and BCI or BMI, it's still in the early pioneering stages, but as you say, it's accelerating at a much faster clip, right? So I guess that's a great place for us to end off. But before we wrap up, how about you tell us a little bit more about the organization you founded? It's Neurotech. Am I pronouncing that right?
Norfolk X.
Okay.
So Norfolk X is a non-for-profit organization with the mission of facilitating the advancement of neurotechnology. So as you, I hope that I expressed right during the interview, that it's a very exciting field, but yet very early. But the future itself is not written. It's our job to write that future, to shape that future. So Neurotech X, the goal is to, as I said, to facilitate the advancement of the field. To do so, we focus mainly on 3 pillars. So the first one being community, so people. The second one being education, knowledge. And the third one being innovation. So once we have the first and the second pillar, so once we have people that are educated, then we can tackle challenges, projects, startups, moonshots, things like that. So we really want to put a framework for people that are what we call neurotech enthusiasts. So people that want to be in the field that are not necessarily doing a PhD or a master, or they are, but anybody who's really excited about the future and want to contribute, we want to make sure that we have a framework that can bring all the people together to really bring more, I would say, energy in the system to advance the field of neurotechnology. So obviously that mission is very ambitious and yet very exciting and challenging. And I would say we address different topics, different part of the field. So whether it's from open source, transparency, accessibility of the technology, whether it's education, so raise awareness about where we really are in the field, what are the current limitations, what can people work on, where can people contribute, things like that. And just to bring people together at a local level, but also internationally. So we have a lot of different chapters in different cities. We're currently in 18 cities around the world, in cities like Montreal, New York, San Francisco, Boston, London, obviously all the neurotech hubs, but also more in remote area. And this year, the organization is going to focus more on more remote and less obvious neurotech hubs. So we have a chapter, for example, in Lima. And now we're going to be opening other chapters in India, China. So the goal is really for people that want to be part of the field, that are watching videos on YouTube, being inspired by the field, but doesn't know where to start. So whether you start if you want to get involved or just learn more, or you just, what the goal of the organization, that you would just Google neurotech in your city, for example, and then you have a chapter, and then you connect with these people, and then you take it from there. So that's the goal of the organization, and we have different initiatives. So, for example, the chapters are one of them. We're currently working on what we call Neurotech EDU, which is an online platform for neurotechnology education. We've also launched our student club initiative. So we're starting student club, or help starting student clubs in different universities. We have an annual competition, so undergrads can start playing with neurotechnology to create application, whether it's a game or it's art or it's whatever related to brain technology. And then they compete against other student club in different universities. So as you would see in any engineering field, in robotics and things like that, now we try to put such a framework, but with neurotechnology and biosignals.
Sounds great. And how can people find Neurotech X online, and how could they reach out to you?
So obviously the first step is neurotechx.com. So the website, you'll get some information there. The second, on Twitter as well, NeurotechX, on Facebook as well. Then the second step is probably, if you want to talk and interact with people on a local level, we have meetups. So you can go on Meetup if you want to connect with your local group. And also we have a Slack platform, so a chat platform to interact with other neurotech enthusiasts. So you could join the Slack and start interacting and talking with other people from around the world that are super passionate about this, coming from the field, whether it's the cognitive and neuroscience or computer science, engineering as well.
All right, Yannick, that was fun. Thank you for sharing your insights today.
Thanks to you for inviting me. I hope that it was kind of clear enough. We're trying to cover a lot of things, not going too deep into details, but enough that people can understand some of the science and the facts behind it. So I hope that people will enjoy and get some information out of it.
So what do you think? What impact will neurotechnology have on our healthcare system? Do you think we'll be able to merge the human mind with machines? And if so, how will integration change what it means to be human? Send us your thoughts about the insights Yannick shared with us at feedback@quantumrun.com. We'll publish the most thoughtful feedback on our website. Or read more about this topic on our website, Quantumrun.com. I want to thank our guest Yannick Roy again for joining us, and the podcast music you're listening to now is composed by Karl Gutowski. Finally, want to support the show? Then be sure to subscribe to it on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or anywhere else you find your podcasts. And while you're there, be sure to like, heart, share, review, and recommend this podcast to your friends. It really does help. That's it for now, but be sure to join us for another episode of Quantum Run on One.